began with something so small, just a quiet locker in a quiet high school hallway. No one noticed when her shirt tore. No one heard it either, until everything snapped into motion. She was just another face in the crowd. A girl with few friends and fewer words. In that brutal moment, 3 bullies decided to make her their target. What they didn't know was that she carried more than textbooks in her backpack. She carried years of silent resilience, taught to her by the man who raised her. One swift judo flip tops the world of a bully. The hallway froze. The bullies scrambled. But when the principal finally saw the footage, even he couldn't believe his eyes. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Sam. To most, just another face in a sea of students, anonymous, overlooked, unseen. But I saw her, tracked her through corridors, past buzzing vending machines, past locker clusters. Her shuffle was light, her shoulders heavy, not tired in the physical way, but in the way that heartbreak wears you down over time. And that morning, man, I can still hear it. Snap. A shirt tearing. The kind of sound that rips more than cloth. It rips dignity, innocence, space to breathe. That moment dropped the temperature in that hallway so hard it felt like the entire school held its breath. 3 bullies circled round her locker like sharks. I won't pretend I know their names, but I know what they did. Pulled her shirt until it tore as a taunt, a show of power, an act of degradation. She didn't collapse. She didn't wheeze or stumble. She just paused, listened, and then she flipped him. A perfect, textbook judo throw. 1 second she stooped over snapped plastic and scattered books. The next she's standing over a stunned kid, his spine bent backward like she'd remade gravity for him. It was beautiful. It was shocking. It was necessary. But here's the darkest piece. The security camera at locker 27. It died minutes before that happened. School officials called it a malfunction. Funny how a malfunction can be timed so cleanly, then restart just in time to catch nothing but her walking away. I thought, why protect her? This didn't benefit the school. This wasn't a PR move. They erased the visual history of her fight. So I started asking the questions nobody wanted answered. Why did no one help her? Who taught her judo? What are the adults hiding? I dove into stories, histories, looking for echoes. Like the South Carolina teen who nearly ended her life after relentless bullying in her classroom. Or that Australian teen who, armed with judo, flipped his tormentor and shook his community, without a trending hashtag in sight. The pattern was haunting. Vulnerability. Invisibility. Until the moment control shifted. Martial arts, especially judo, they do more than teach moves. They teach stance, how to hold yourself in a world that wants you small. Studies show kids in martial arts have higher self-control and fewer bullying behaviors. They learn the discipline to stand, the clarity to see a threat before it starts, the strength to endure, not just strike. But Sam's flip wasn't about defense. It was about announcing she would be seen. She would not be silent anymore. And yet, the school turned off the cameras. The principal buried records. Parents hushed. Kids whispered. I don't pretend to know everything. There's still haze in the story. But one thing is clear. Somebody didn't want the truth to come out. If we walk away now, we let that stand. We let silence become complicity. So I ask you again, what would you have done in the hallway that morning, when the security camera blinked out, when a kid's dignity was ripped, and when one quiet girl chose to stand her ground? That's what we're going to find out together. Before we step through the lockers into Sam's world, tell me where you're watching from. Drop a city, a state, because every time a story like this gets told, it grows roots across America. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. Because the stories we share here don't always come easy, but they deserve to be heard. I remember the first time I saw her. Not really saw her, but caught a glimpse of something most folks missed. She moved like wind through cornstalks, barely noticeable. Didn't speak much. Kept her eyes low, books hugged to her chest, like they were the last things in the world holding her together. Her name was Sam, 17. Lived out on Old Finch Road in a one-story house with a crooked mailbox and a porch swing that squeaked with every gust of wind. She was raised by her grandfather, Joe, a Vietnam vet who folks said once walked into a burning Jeep just to pull out a man he barely knew. Tough as nails, that man, but soft in the places that mattered. They say her parents died in a car accident when she was just 10. Some say it was winter. Black ice took the wheel. Others say her father had been drinking that night. Nobody ever asked Sam, and if they had, she wouldn't have answered. That girl carried silence like it was stitched into her skin. But behind those quiet eyes was a storm, one that started years before the locker slammed and her shirt tore. Joe didn't talk much about the war, but every scar on his hands told stories he didn't need to say out loud. He believed in structure, honor, and something he called discipline before dominance. He taught Sam how to stand tall, not loud, how to fight with her balance, not her fists. Said you only throw a punch when you already know how the fight ends. He didn't call it judo back then. Said it was just knowing how to move when the world's trying to knock you down. And every afternoon, while the world was busy chasing noise and speed, Joe would be out back with Sam, barefoot on the dirt, guiding her through movements passed down from a generation that bled too much to forget. I saw them once, just once. Late October, leaves crunching underfoot, Joe guiding Sam's hand like a sculptor does clay. Her form was small but precise, and when she moved, arms, legs, breath, it was like watching poetry that didn't need words. And still, nobody noticed her. The teachers didn't call on her. The other kids didn't tease her, not yet. But they didn't see her either. And in high school, sometimes being invisible hurts more than being mocked. That's the thing nobody tells you. Loneliness ain't always loud. Sometimes it's in the spaces between, like waiting for someone to ask you how you're doing and knowing they won't. Walking past a hallway full of people and feeling like a ghost they forgot to bury. But Joe? He saw her. He always saw her. She used to sit on the porch steps after training, sweat on her brow, bruises on her wrists. And Joe'd hand her a glass of water and just nod, like that was enough. Like saying, "You're stronger than yesterday." Didn't need words. Then, on her 16th birthday, Sam found something in the attic. An old shoebox wrapped in duct tape. Inside were letters. Her father's handwriting, faded with time. One of them read, "When you're afraid, remember who you come from." She never showed it to anyone, but she folded that paper and kept it in her back pocket, even on gym days. You could tell by the shape it left on her jeans. That message? It lived in her. You could see it in the way she moved through the world, quiet but anchored. Hurt, maybe, but never hollow. And the more I watched, the more I realized, this girl didn't need attention. She needed space, a place to grow, a place where she didn't have to defend herself just for existing. But this world doesn't always give that kind of grace to people like Sam. Visual, rain falling on the school parking lot. Sam sitting inside an old pickup truck watching classmates laugh and run. Her face is expressionless, but her eyes are oceans. See, in a place like that, a small town where the loudest voices get the mic, a quiet girl becomes an easy target. They don't ask who she is, they just decide. And for a while, it was whispers, looks, snickers in the hallway. Nothing she couldn't brush off. But cruelty is like rust. Starts small, spreads fast. By junior year, Sam had become that girl. The one folks joked about when they thought no one was listening. The one boys dared each other to talk to as a prank. The one girls warned their boyfriends not to look at, like she was a stain on the social fabric. But Sam never fought back. Not with words, not with fists. She just walked away, every single time. And every time she did, I wondered how deep that silence went, what it was hiding, what would happen if it ever broke. And I know she did too. Because here's the thing, every person's got a A moment where survival ain't enough anymore. A moment where silence feels like surrender. And when that day comes, you don't always see it coming. You think it starts at the locker, with the rip of a shirt. But it doesn't. It starts years before, in the shadows, in the ache of being forgotten, in the lessons a grandfather whispers to a girl who's lost too much too soon. It starts with a choice, not to be loud, not to fight, but to wait, to watch. And when the time came, Sam didn't scream. She didn't cry. She remembered who she came from. And when that hallway exploded into chaos, that's exactly what she did. March 3rd, Locker 27. The morning was unremarkable. Just a humid spring day, students drifting in, lockers opening, lockers closing. I remember how leaves scratched the sidewalk outside, dry and brittle, no warning of what would come. It began with Sam turning the combination lock. A pause. A breath. Her books tumbled onto the linoleum floor. As she knelt to pick them up, I sensed a shift, an undercurrent crackling through the air. The hall grew quieter. Kids glanced over and looked away. Third period hadn't started yet, but it felt like something was about to burst. 3 of them stepped in. 3 silhouettes, same as always. Loud, cruel, confident. One of them, the ringleader, loomed over Sam's shoulder. He let out a low laugh, like he was letting the pack know it was time to strike. "Let's see what she's hiding," he muttered under his breath, and then he slammed her locker shut. I saw her hands freeze over her books, saw her breathe catch, felt a prickle in my chest, like someone had stabbed dread into the world. Then came the rip. It tore through her back in thin cotton threads. The sound echoed. I saw Sam's shoulders stiffen. There was a moment of silence, not the peace before calm, but the kind before a storm hits. She dropped her books, let them fall in slow arcs. In that silence, she steadied herself. And then, her body moved. She stepped forward into the center of the hallway, a pivot, an extension of her arm. Her leg shifted, and gravity changed direction. The largest of the bullies flew off her shoulder, past stunned faces, past forgotten lockers, past 2 terrified teachers who looked on but did not move. Her hoodie swung in a breeze that didn't exist. Books lay scattered. That pivot changed everything. Not anger, not rage. It was precision. Controlled. Deliberate. A judo flip used exactly right. No punch, no kick, just leverage, balance, will. Then the thug hit the hard floor. A dull thump, but a loud message. The hallway crackled with shock. Even the school cameras caught something, once they rebooted at least. But earlier, they were dark. All they captured was Sam standing tall, chest heaving, eyes distant. Heartbeat loud enough you could feel it in the tile beneath her feet. No tears, no cries, just presence. It was the kind of moment that fractures a day, makes you hold your breath, makes you wonder what could have been if nobody stepped in before. I still don't know if she planned it, if she always knew she could. What I do know, this wasn't a reaction, it was a response, a defense, raised from the ashes of every moment she'd been pushed aside. A lesson learned in years of quiet training, every move steady, as if she'd rehearsed it in dreams. A teacher finally stepped forward. The bullies scrambled to their feet. One of them looked back at Sam, mouth open, eyes wide. He leaned on a locker for support, as if gravity had become his enemy. But Sam? She didn't look at him, didn't gloat, didn't run. She just turned and walked away. That's when the hallway emptied. Lockers slammed. Teachers whispered. Parents called. And the footage? It showed exactly what happened, and still, nobody was ready for what came after. A mini cliffhanger. Sam's walk away looked chosen, almost regal, like she carried something beyond fear, something we'll begin to understand, but perhaps only later. Because this moment, it changed her world, and ours. But the real question is, what happens when she gets to the end of that hallway? When the adrenaline fades, and the world rushes in. That's what nobody expected. When the hallway emptied and chaos settled, nobody knew what to do. But the machine spun on, as it always does. They called the principal first. In textbook fashion, he made his announcement. Sam, along with the 3 bullies, was suspended pending investigation. The school moved to contain it, lock down the narrative, lock up the conversation. I could feel my gut twist, because the world doesn't react that way when innocence is on trial. That reaction was the first clue that something was off. Next came the police, lights cutting through the early spring dusk. But the question they asked wasn't who did it, but who should answer. Was Sam a victim or a suspect? And the bullies, the big one, the ringleader, were they criminals or protégés of a violent right? Then the narratives began to splinter. Bullies' parents went public. They filed assault charges. They hired attorneys. They spoke of their sons as if they'd been ambushed by a rogue ninja in plain sight. They painted her as the aggressor. Meanwhile, Sam's grandfather, Grandpa Joe, stood his ground. He delivered the footage to the local sheriff's department with steady hands, steady voice. The footage wasn't just evidence, it was truth pressed into their palms. That footage was damning, but not for Sam. It showed intent. It showed defense. It showed a lifetime of silence erupted into motion. Yet just like that, the tides turned. Rumors started crawling in, whispers across locker rooms and parent groups. She was trained. She was coached for this. Media outlets repackaged her story into sound bites. Teen girl attacks classmates flashed across screens, headlines screaming controversy. Some framed it as hyper-trained violence. Others painted it as teenage rebellion gone too far. But what haunted me most wasn't the noise. It was the silence of the adults who watched her become invisible long before lines were drawn on linoleum. Then came the red herrings. They found out one of the bullies had been suspended 3 times before. Small infractions that never made it to permanent files, never became part of any school-wide pattern. School counseled, parents paid fines, and life moved on. But those invisible incidents, and they mattered. Because when you study them together, you see the cracks in the system. School administrators prioritized their safety rating, test scores, graduation rates, spotless record books. They weren't protecting students, they were protecting data. And when that mattered more than her, when paper was worth more than human screams, that's when I realized the fight wasn't just in that hallway. It was everywhere, invisible but lethal. The sheriff's team dug into the pattern. They found inconsistencies. No documentation of prior bullying, students afraid, teachers who saw but looked away, administrators who remembered later. They pressed the principal, and he stumbled. They found counselor notes, deleted, incident referrals, lost, emails, never replied. They discovered the CCTV glitch was no accident. They uncovered questions that hadn't been asked. And for every piece of evidence erased, a trust shivered. But Sam, she stayed silent. Call her stubborn. Call her stone-faced. Call her any name you want. But that silence? That was survival. Because speaking out meant dragging her grief back into the light, reliving the accident that stole her parents, revisiting every day that no one saw her, reliving every bruise, every whispered insult. So she didn't talk. She didn't cry. She let the footage speak. Every time the sheriff called her in, she showed up. Every time they asked questions, she answered calmly, barely. But what she said with her eyes told more. She wasn't asking for justice. She was demanding acknowledgement, and the community felt it. Parents turned to parents, some angry, some ashamed. Teachers started checking their cameras. Students whispered apologies into hallways, as if hope traveled on broken ceilings. But the lawsuit, that changed everything. Seeing reports of other schools swept similar scandals under the rug shook this town's foundation. Not far from here, a school district was labeled deliberately indifferent to harassment complaints, sparking investigations into Title IX failures. all because they refused to protect kids who weren't loud enough to be seen. And a few states over, parents were suing over near-fatal outcomes, like the 12-year-old South Carolina girl forced to the edge after months of bullying, whose parents say the school failed her at every turn. We realized we weren't alone. This wasn't a tragedy in isolation. It was a pattern, a symptom of a system that favors silence over survival, optics over humanity. So while Sam's silence remained unbroken, the world around it began cracking, because once you uncover the machinery that hides the pain, it can't put itself back together. And the most powerful thing, it didn't take her words. It took her presence, because the system responded not to her voice, but to the weight of her stillness. When Grandpa Joe walked into that press circle, I felt the air shift. That man, old war stories etched into his face, fists scarred from decades, stood calm in the storm of questions. But he carried more than answers. He carried truth. He told them, Sam was no ordinary teenager afraid of confrontation. She'd been a state-level judo competitor, before the accident, before grief silenced her parents. Judo wasn't a hobby. It was a language she learned to speak when words failed her house, a way to honor a father she barely remembered, a way to survive a world that didn't notice she was drowning. Then came the confession nobody saw coming. He revealed what I'd felt in my bones. Sam had been bullied for 6 straight months. Not whispered rumors, not casual snickers. Full force, everyday bullying so consistent it became her shadow. Each morning, she walked into the school with tremors in her chest. A fight-or-flight response that never got to respond until that morning under the flickering hallway light. And just like the security cameras and the system itself, the school counselor's logs, they'd vanished, deleted, wiped clean from the record, like her suffering never existed. That part broke me, because evidence isn't just paperwork, it's acknowledgement. Deleting it, erasing parts of her, erasing her human weight in this world. They brought the case to court. The defense team, quiet, deliberate, rolled out video, expert testimony, the context of judo training. They showed how martial arts isn't just about throwing people. It's about clearing the mind, grounding the soul, mastering self-control. In studies, structured programs have prevented bullying, not amplified it. That's the quiet irony. What Sam learned was meant to diffuse bullying until it became necessary to stop it. They walked the courtroom through months of rumors, erased logs, empty suspension files. They pointed to the principal's bump in optics, a single incident that rocked the school's safety ratings, and then concession that jogged truth loose from teeth and bones. And then came the moment when the judge listened, not to sensationalism, not to headlines, but to the broken quiet of one girl and the metal clack of a press conference that cut through lies. He dismissed the charges. No assault finding stood. Sam's name was cleared, but the school wasn't. Bullies were diverted to mandatory probation. The principal was removed. But this? It felt bigger than a victory. It felt like someone finally spoke her name. Because justice, real justice, isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes in the hush someone dared to hold. Sometimes it's when the system finally unpauses the video and watches the truth. He held her, not triumphant, but protective, as if business were concluded. But most of the work was just beginning. Because courtrooms close doors, but hearts, they remain open. What they didn't expect was that Sam wasn't fighting just for herself. She was fighting for every quiet kid shoved into corners, for every erased file and deleted log, for every missing voice in the hallways of history. And in that courtroom, as the judge's gavel hit, the whole world, small as it felt, remembered her. I watched her step back into that school, quiet, cautious but unyielding. There was no grand entrance, no eyes flickering toward her. Just a girl walking into the same hall she walked into before, but now with her entire world behind her. Sam chose to graduate early, Not because she was avoiding the world, but because she was stepping into a new season, on her terms. I remember the day she handed in her diploma. There were fewer people in the stands than usual. No cheering crowds, no flashy banners. Just a single rose and a distant cheer from Grandpa Joe, seated at the back. And then, an image I'll never forget. In the photo, her father, crisp uniform, dojo belt tied just right. Young Sam, maybe 5, clutching his leg as he watched him bow. You could feel the pride in that picture, the promise, the lineage. He said, "Don't bring that fight into the world if there's nothing to fight for." His voice was quiet, like all the breeze that climbs out of trees when the storm has passed. She didn't need revenge. She already held power, the kind that makes you choose peace over retaliation. And in that moment, Sam understood what Grandpa had always taught her. True strength doesn't come from making people fall. It comes from choosing not to. And here's where I felt the twist settle into my chest. One of the bullies, the big one, the loud one, walks into a mat room. He's older now, quieter too. His face shows a shape shifting, maybe guilt, maybe purpose. He kneels, bows, and puts on a GI. He begins to teach kids he once would have been standing beside during those cruel moments. I heard a mother whisper from the doorway, "He teaches respect now." And he does. Respect and humility, not taunts or terror. He shows kids how to fall, how to rise, and how to say the most powerful words any of us can say. I was wrong, and I want better. That sting of contradiction, the man who hurt Sam is now part of her legacy of strength. I stood there watching that transformation and felt something shift inside me too. Sam didn't just survive. She taught the world what survival could sound like. In a world where silence is mistaken for weakness, she showed the power of stillness. Her story didn't end with a fight. It ended in the choice not to fight. It ended with lives changing, even the life of a kid who'd once thought cruelty was strength. And in the echo of that dojo, I heard the promise of something greater. Strength lives in restraint, in turning pain into purpose, in holding space for healing, not revenge. That's Sam's final act, not a loud applause, not a roar, but a whisper that carried further. If her story reached you, left you thinking, tell me below, have you ever chosen peace over power? Have you seen someone grow from hurt into healing? Hit like, leave a comment, and if you're not subscribed, subscribe now. Because some stories deserve to shake you and then let you breathe. Sam's silence was not weakness. It was her foundation. Her strength wasn't in the flip. It was in the calm she returned to. And that calm? It's louder than any crash. There's something about silence, man. Not the kind you get when folks don't got nothing to say. I'm talking about the kind that settles in after a storm, when the wreckage is still fresh and your breath don't feel like it belongs in your chest yet. That was the kind of silence Sam left behind when she walked out of that school for the last time. No press, no goodbyes, no congratulations, just the soft creak of her locker, and the sound of one life quietly closing a chapter the world never really understood. She could have stayed, held her head high, made them all look her in the eye. But that ain't what she wanted. Sam never fought for attention. She fought for peace. And that's what she chose in the end. She graduated early, paper signed, ceremony skipped. And when I say she disappeared, I mean it. Like dust blown off an old photo. 1 minute she was there, and then she was gone. But just 'cause she left don't mean the echoes stopped. That picture, man, you could feel the weight of it just by looking. It wasn't just her father in that frame. It was all the history, all the silence, all the discipline that molded that girl. You see, when the system failed her, when the adults meant to protect her turned away, it wasn't revenge she reached for. It was legacy. And when she chose to leave, she didn't leave empty-handed. She carried that belt, folded tight. She carried that photo, worn from years of tears and time. And she carried the stillness of her father's last words written in his own shaky hand. When you're afraid, remember who you come from. Now you might think that's the end, that Sam got out clean and life just moved on. But the truth? The truth got one last twist. 6 months later, one of the boys who tore Sam's shirt, who spat hate and hid behind a mob, he showed up at a judo class. Not to fight, not to flex, but to learn. And not just judo, but humility, respect, restraint. I don't know what broke in him that day she put him on the floor. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the realization that she didn't flinch, not once. But whatever it was, he changed, started helping the younger kids, teaching them how to fall, how to get back up, teaching them that real strength ain't loud. It's quiet, it's controlled, it's earned. And you know what? That's the thing I still think about. Not the courtroom, not the news clips, not even the flip. It's the stillness after. It's how Sam never needed to say a word. 'Cause what she did, how she stood her ground, spoke louder than any headline ever could. In a world that mistakes silence for weakness, Sam showed the power of stillness, not just to survive, but to change something, to reach someone, to remind all of us that justice don't always roar. Sometimes it moves like a whisper, strikes like a memory, and leaves behind a story that don't let you sleep the same again. Now I gotta ask you something. Have you ever stayed silent when you should have stood up? Would you have done what Sam did? Look, I ain't asking for confessions, but I am asking for truth. If you felt something in this story, if it stirred up your own memories of when you were Sam, or when you should have stood beside someone like her, talk to me. Drop it in the comments, tell your story. Somebody out there needs to hear it, not next week, not next year, now. And if you made it this far, you already know what to do, like comment, subscribe. Not for numbers, but so this truth don't get buried. Next week, we go deeper. A gas station clerk, one bullet, a whisper on his last breath, and a murder solved 18 years later. But for now, remember Sam, and remember this. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it flips you flat on your back and makes you think twice.